From the time I started covering energy and climate and now is that people realize that it's real and it has to do with their livelihoods. And so that's what's making them nervous more than anything else. My hope is that out of every 100 people who have read my story, maybe 10 people will change their mind. Maybe one person will change their behavior. So that's how optimistic I am. But I don't feel that view would be prevalent in Taiwan because we have elections every 4 years. And the politicians are always thinking about what can I make, what can I produce in the next 3 months, 1 year, 2 years.
That will help me get re-elected.
Yes.
Welcome back to The Switch, not just another podcast from a very special place, actually Taiwan, Taipei. So you see this amazing view we have in the background is across the world. We are here to interview a superstar that I'm going to tell you about very soon. But before that, I just want to remind you why we are here today. The Switch is all about making you get more information, to educate you, to entertain you about everything that has to do with the switch, so that you and I together can make sure to switch into a greener, better and healthier planet where we can live and rejoice for many, many, many hundreds of decades left. To do that, I get exciting guests with me here today that have expertise on different topics, and we discuss truly honestly both elevating and bullshitting everything that is out there to be done. I don't have my producer in-house, but I have a special crew behind the scenes here that are helping me to produce this show. So I hope you are ready for this. If you like this, make sure you share, make sure you subscribe and comment so that we get your focus and thoughts, because that's what drives us. Without no further ado, I think it is time for me to present the guest of today. In the realm of journalism and podcasting, there exists a force to be reckoned with, a trailblazer who fearlessly uncovers the hidden stories that shape our world. I want you to meet Kwangyin Liu, an award-winning journalist, podcast host whose passion for truth and environmental advocacy had garnered her with widespread recognition. With an unparalleled ability to dwell into the depths of Taiwan's energy transition and environmental challenges, she was honored with the prestigious 2020 SOPA Award for Excellence in Reporting on the Environment. I think that is pretty cool. She's working for the CommonWealth Magazine and making sure that her voice is heard and the stories are told. But that's not all. She has a podcast, Taiwanology. Has started earlier this year and captured many's attention. And I hope that this will help her raise attention for that podcast, because it will break ground in Taiwan. With a knack for captivating storytelling and with a lot of experience in this area, I am super happy to have you here on the podcast with me.
Thank you, Christina. Very privileged to be here with you.
No, I am privileged to have you here. Listen, you have done major pieces that has really shaped the conversation in Taiwan. Just to take one example, you were the one who put geothermal on the agenda 2 years ago here in Taiwan, and actually now there is a government is looking into it. It's really interesting how much journalism can do.
Just 2 years, it felt much longer. Yeah.
No, it's been 2 years, and what I look at when I see that is it's so cool how creating awareness and putting the right people at the right time together can actually make such a change in short time.
Right. I should say that the stars were aligned at the right time when Taiwan was just thinking about energy transition and picking up renewable energy, and people started to pay attention to other renewable energy sources and more importantly, stable ones, apart from wind and solar, of course, very hugely important. So I think at the right time, Van from baseload power came into my horizon. I think I met him at a conference of Scandinavian startups, and really baseload power caught my eye, and I immediately reached out to him, and I also realized we had some common friends. So yeah, that was easy, and it was really a privilege for me to have broken the story baseload power in Taiwan.
You say that stars align, but I also think it's very much of hard work. We're going to dive into that. I know that that is, but before that, I really want to get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
So it's time to roll the wheel of questions and see what you get.
Ooh, wow.
From our producers back there.
Okay.
Wheel of questions. What would you sing at karaoke night?
It's gonna be "It's My Life" by Bon Jovi.
Oh.
One of my favorite songs.
And why is that?
Well, I think it's really true. It's really brave, daring, and it's telling people like you cannot dictate what I'm gonna do because it's my life. It's in my hands. I'm the master of my own fate. I like it a lot.
Is that something that has been driving, is that a driving force within you generally?
Yeah, I think so. I think growing up in Asia, as a woman growing up in Asia, it's really easy to have people tell you what you are supposed to do, what you're supposed to think, but I just refuse to be shaped by other people's opinion. I must say that it's still inside me. I think it's ingrained in my genes, but I'm doing my best to fight the urge to care too much about how people think of me, and just have to be the master of my own fate.
It takes strength to do that. Where does your strength come from?
I think the strength comes from the urge to, I don't know, not to succumb. I honestly think it's probably my education. My mother has always been a very hard worker. She has never given up working. I mean, she's over 60. She can retire now, but she just doesn't want to stay at home and stay put. So she always tries to, tell us to, work hard and be a useful people to the society.
It's pretty interesting. Yeah. There is often a mother somewhere in the picture, and when you have a mother that is a role model, it can really give you the energy. I feel the same. I have an amazing mother. So cheers to our mothers, right?
Yes, yes. Cheers.
Cheers to our mother. Yeah. Cool.
Wheel of questions. Who is your hero and what is your proudest accomplishment?
So this might sound like cliche, but so I've been at CommonWealth Magazine for 11 years. So that sounds like really a long time. But I would say that the hero would be the founder of the magazine, Diane Ng. And she is also a journalist. She's 82 years old now, retired 2 years ago, and she started CommonWealth Magazine at the age of 40, around the time when U.S. and Taiwan broke ties, diplomatic ties. So around the time in Taiwan, there was really a sense of despair. So people in Taiwan were like, "Oh, we're gonna go under now because America has given up on us," and she just felt that Taiwan needs more encouragement, and we need to really make it in the world for ourselves. We need to prove that we are worthy partners in a lot of things, politically, economically. Taiwan needs to be a force to be reckoned with. People cannot ignore us, and we have to prove ourselves worthy. That's why we always have to work hard and prove ourselves useful, because we don't have the luxury of just sitting there and waiting for people to help us. If we don't start helping ourselves, that's not going to happen. So yeah, she's my hero because she's a reporter, but she's also a businesswoman, very successful one, I should say, even though the business of media is not doing very well. I don't think around the world. We're still profitable, not super profitable, of course, but we are trying to do the right things. We're trying to do the good things and making money along the way. But of course, that's not the priority. So yeah, I should say she's my hero.
Let's dive into the subject we're here for today.
Okay.
Let's go. I mean, you covered the transition, the climate and the environmental topics for many years. If you think about when you started and where we are today, what are the biggest changes? What are the differences in what you are reporting?
Yeah, so I started covering energy transition and climate change, I think back in 2015 for CommonWealth Magazine. All started because at the time the magazine didn't have someone to cover energy because the guy just left, and also there was an opportunity for someone at the magazine to cover the to COP21st in Paris, and that was a really very crucial moment for the climate activism, I think. So at the time, I was able to go to Paris and attend the COP21. The big one for the first time was my first experience at a UNFCCC conference. I had to say I was impressed at the scale and the magnitude of the things that they were trying to achieve. And I also realized that was a watershed moment for climate ambitions across the world, because that was the time, for the very first time, I think all the countries were, they signed the agreement to keep the increase of temperature under 1.5 degrees. That was the announced ambition. And I think
the agreement that we're always referring back to, the Paris Agreement.
Yes, the Paris Agreement. That's true. And I had to say that that was 8 years ago. Before that, the climate coverage in Taiwan were mainly about the melting glaciers, the polar bears. It felt so far away from us, and people talked about Al Gore's documentary film, The Inconvenient Truth, a lot. So that was the conversation, but everything felt so distant. And people were talking about the Marshall Islands, Maldives, Tuvalu sinking, but people didn't really feel that, it had anything to do with us. Right, so there was no imminent
I think
threat.
that was general globally, right, as well.
Right.
I mean, that was the feeling that when the Paris Agreement was signed. It was more about, as you said, polar bears and...
Yeah, it was around the time. But I feel that in Europe, things were already moving quickly. So France, Scandinavia, Germany, they started talking about decarbonization long before Taiwan. And really after a Paris Agreement, the climate topic became real in Taiwan, mainly because it's about money. It just became about money, survival, economic survival, because Taiwan is really dependent on trade. I would say that 80% of our revenues come from external trade. And when Paris Agreement happened, companies, the big brands, Apple, IKEA, all the global brands around the world started pledging net zero ambitions and maybe renewable energy ambitions. It started becoming real for Taiwanese companies, mainly because it now has something to do with them. It's no longer about polar bears and glaciers.
It's something that they have to change and do.
Right, otherwise they have no business for the future. So that's mainly when the interest picked up. So that's also around the time when I first covered renewable energy about 3-4 years ago. People started paying attention to that not because they really were concerned about the climate. It's mainly because, oh yeah, if I don't use it enough renewable energy, I'm going to lose all my business for the future. So I would say that from the time I started covering energy and climate and now, is that people realize that it's real and it has to do with their livelihoods. And so that's what's making them nervous more than anything else.
Do you feel that the climate in the conversation has changed? Is it more harsh now? Was it easier to get the stories in the beginning than it is now? What are the differences in the journalism part?
So for journalists, I think in the beginning when we started covering climate, we were focusing on like the technical side or the degradation of nature, and then around the time we just felt very frustrated because the stories we did, nobody was interested in reading them. And right now, really, I think more and more journalists are doing the story because people's attention really have shifted. They know that this has to do with our business. So I would say that our reporting focus now is really more on new business models. So I think phase one was maybe the awareness of the calamity, the crisis part. And the phase two is acceptance and how do we adapt to the new situation. And now phase three, I think as a business reporter, where we come in is really how do we develop new solutions and using the Taiwan's expertise in technical, we have a lot of technical experts in circular economy. We have a lot of material scientists. And so it's mainly coming up with new business models, new solutions for problems. For example, waste. I could name a very recent example. So my intern just did a very impactful story, I would say, of a small startup company that was able to turn toxic waste from TSMC into some new material that can be used in steel making industry. So the steel making industry in Taiwan, they used to need to import that material from China. So 10 years ago, China started restricting the export of that material. And it was around the time when TSMC was thinking about how to deal with their waste. Actually, as a result of our cover story in 2015.
There you go, change.
Yeah, so change. So this TSMC realized they had to pay more attention to their waste disposal rather than just outsourcing it to one company. So this year, TSMC started a new zero waste center in central Taiwan. They have found 5 companies that are really experts in circular economy solutions. They put them together and they have pledged to discharge zero toxic waste from their processes.
I'll go awesome on that one, I think.
Yes, the first awesome today.
Yes, so we're going to have many more.
Yeah. I would say that right now the focus is really on new business proposals, new solutions for the climate crisis, the waste crisis. So we are here to provide solutions.
If you look at it from that perspective, that there are 3 phases, it's in a sense what we know is not going fast enough. You mentioned that you were on the first COP. We soon have a new COP. Are we moving the needle?
Right. It's a really tough question. I guess it really depends on who you ask. I think if you are asking somebody who is in the business of oil and gas, they will say, of course, because we are the ones that have the resources to move the needle. Because we have been making so much money, and if you stop us from making even more money, how can we fund the climate transition? Because, oh, look, we are also investing in offshore wind. We are investing in all kinds of renewable energy solutions. We are starting our own carbon credit certification agencies to certify, the carbon credits we have accumulated ourselves. So of course we are moving the needle, but maybe that's on the book. You would the corporates they can come up with all kinds of ways to make it seem like they have achieved something, right? But in terms of if they have really moved the needle, if they have really changed anything, I would put a big question mark on that. So, but on the other hand, if you ask the activists, if you ask the Fridays for Future people, the media, there's a really an abundance of climate conscious journalists and media outlets out there. So if you ask them, I think from a grassroots level, people will feel that the needle has been moved and the needle will keep moving because more and more people are aware of the climate crisis, and you will see a lot of people who are also doing what they can to sort of revive maybe the natural habitats or to teach their kids about climate. And I think maybe from a grassroots level, that the needle has moved more than the corporate world.
Has it been difficult to be a journalist throughout this period? Going from no clicks to more clicks and then also being guided by the clicks in a sense? Has it been difficult to be a journalist, to be driving and to try to move that needle?
Yes, it's been challenging, I should say. From no clicks and from there was a time I could really struggle to think about any other journalists who are covering the climate topic. But now I should say that there's a saturation of also climate topics because everybody is talking about ESG is the latest trend. So all the media outlets, they started the ESG channel over the past 1 or 2 years. We were among the first, but now it's really, the scene is very crowded. And also our magazine was also the first one to introduce the idea of corporate social responsibility, and we have had that award for more than 20 years. But now there's so many other similar awards out there. And also I should say that more opportunities for companies to engage in greenwashing activities and campaigns. They could pay to be an award winner at those events, take great pictures saying, yeah, we have done something really nice. But in terms of really has anything been changed, and also for journalists, it's a struggle to find really you have to find really worthy climate stories as opposed to greenwashing stories. And maybe some of the younger journalists, if they are less experienced, it could be more difficult for them to tell the difference. So sometimes journalists could be tricked into covering really flashy, beautiful looking stories that they saying they're climate heroes. Yeah.
Should we? Thank you.
The BS stories.
Yeah.
They're a lot out there. So I think really the challenge for journalists now is to be able to tell the worthy stories from the less worthy ones. And that's a constant challenge, I should say. Yeah.
How do you overcome a challenge like that? How do you work in order to find out?
Yes, it takes time and experience and stumbles, I should say. But luckily, our magazine really has really encouraged us to take our time and to talk to as many experts as possible. And also, there's also a lot of respect, and we are encouraged to be, calling BS when we see one. So for example, there's a lot of talk about carbon credits. So as a matter of fact, Taiwan just opened its carbon credit exchange a few weeks ago. And Yeah, so some people might say that, oh yeah, it's a great achievement. But if you really look into it, there's a lot of bubble and the carbon credit exchange. There's really very limited they can do right now, but they're claiming to have been a huge step. And now carbon credit has really created this anxiety among businesses that oh yeah, we have to get our hands on carbon credits. So that's why it also has produced a lot of I would say scammers. Okay, again.
Oh, shit.
People who are claiming that they can help companies get carbon credits and but in fact many of them are maybe just in it to make money, saying that they could teach you things, but they're just taking advantage of people's anxiety. So yeah, that's the
I think
biggest
this is one of
challenge
the really uncomfortable conversations that are not spoken about enough out there, because with opportunity always comes the scammers. So the ones who are trying to take advantage of this opportunity.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are so many people out there who are really trying to do their best to move the needle, and then you have the people who are actually working against it in such a way. If you go back to the work that you've chosen as a journalist, what is the role of journalism in order for us to move the needle? What would you say? How would you explain that?
Right. So I would really say that if Taiwan is a democracy, that has a robust civil society, people really need unbiased and truthful information for them to make informed decisions politically, or if they are going to make investment decisions. I think our responsibility is to tell them what's really going on. So going back to the example of carbon credits, so there, when the carbon credit exchange was introduced, there was really a lot of news coverage saying how great it is, how glorious it is, how much business opportunities are going to be generated by this carbon credit exchange. But for CommonWealth Magazine, we took a more reserved stance. So we have produced a lot of articles telling people there have been actually a lot of myths surrounding this topic, and also what would be the right approach. And so we actually debunked a lot of claims by those scammers. And this is really something that we try to do. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
I think you did. I mean, what I wanted to go at is like the importance of free journalism is a piece of the democracy that needs to be there in order for citizens to do decisions that are based on facts.
Yes, yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's and having a mother who was a journalist, I know what hard work it is to actually find out truths and to convey them in a tasteful way as well.
Yeah, it has to be entertaining as well, unfortunately. Yeah, sometimes my writing is criticized by my editor as being too technical, and it's really hard for people to swallow. So it's something that I'm working on right now.
So do we. That's why we have this podcast. We want to make it entertaining and educating at the same time. Listen, while I have you here, I really can't let you go without, I mean, you have the eyes on Taiwan's situation. If we would just dwell into that for a second, how's the nation's stance on climate change and environmental policies evolved through the years?
The big question could go on for days.
I could sit here with you for days. That's not...
I should say that Taiwan is a latecomer to the game. It has to do with how Taiwan is geographically and politically marginalized for the longest time. Never felt that it's part of the international society. Never felt that it plays any important role. Never felt that it has the responsibility to decarbonize and to care about the issue, because we're not a member of the UNFCCC. So every year when UNFCCC happens, the COP takes place, there's maybe going to be a survey by some international think tank, and Taiwan media coverage will be, okay, Taiwan ranks really badly on the global ranking. We are not doing enough combating climate change. And I should say that the awareness is there now, that the government, the people, and the business, they are aware that the climate crisis is real and we have to do something about it. But the effort, I should say that it's not enough. Yeah, I think everywhere it's not enough. We still have 80% of our electricity coming from fossil fuel sources, imported fossil fuel sources from very far away places like Qatar, the United States, and Australia. And yeah, we are building more fossil power plants, natural gas power plants, building LNG terminals. And so, and in the future, we're going to rely 50% of our power on natural gas, 30% on coal, hopefully 20% on renewable energy. And I would say that energy mix doesn't look very progressive globally, not at all. So that's the energy side. And in the industrial side, well, you probably know already that the energy prices in Taiwan are kept artificially low. It's subsidized by the taxpayers' money. That's why Taipower is losing money. Zhongyou, the CPC, Chinese Petroleum Company, has been losing money big time, maybe even more this year than last year. So since the power prices are so low, the industries here really have very little incentive to save, to conserve energy, to increase energy efficiency. So I would say that either from the government side or the business side, there's effort, but it needs to be more ambitious, and it needs to be faster, and there needs to be better business solutions, but also policies, energy policies.
So based on what you just said, if you had a magic wand and would say 3 things that you would like the government to change, what would that be in order to meet the climate goals?
Right, so I think the first important thing is to rationalize the power prices, because the electricity prices and as well as the water prices are very low here, artificially low for decades. I really think there needs to be a mechanism to increase the price of electricity gradually each year. Maybe we should have started 10 years ago. And the second thing would be a carbon tax for energy use for, I think, mainly industry and the people. That's going to be very important, because without it, the industries and people will have no incentive to save energy or to increase energy efficiency. And the third thing, magic wand, right? So I would like to increase Taiwan's size by 10 times. So we have enough land for solar energy, solar panels, because we know that solar panels, they really took a lot of space. And space is what Taiwan really doesn't have. We have very little space. So that's why we see a lot of conflict between solar power and natural habitat protection. So these are the 3 things. Very difficult.
That's why we should go underground then.
Yes, that's the incentive.
Find the sources
Yes.
over there.
Yeah.
If you look at okay, so we took the Taiwan perspective now. You've been covering both global and local environmental issues. Do you see any differences or trends in both ways?
Right. So my first trip to Europe to cover energy was in 2015, the Paris COP21. Afterwards, I also spent some time in Europe. In 2017, I was on a fellowship in Germany, so I spent a few months in Berlin. I was also covering energy. Then, and last year I took the fellowship again. So last summer it was a really dramatic summer because all over Germany people were buying wood for the winter because the Ukraine war. Russian gas has been cut off gradually, the supply to Germany. So Germans were really nervous what's going to happen. And the industries were really in bad shape because of the really high energy prices. And my feeling was that, okay, so if you want to compare the difference between, let's say, Europe, that's what I'm more familiar with Taiwan, is that I really felt that when people talk about climate and energy, the solutions, they have a more long-term view. They think about decades down the line or maybe hundreds of years. Because I remember when I first went to Germany to cover climate, I was visiting a house that's called a Plus house. So Plus Energy, they produce more energy than they consume. And that project was already going on for 2 decades, I think, even maybe at least 10 years before my visit. So you could really tell that a lot of projects really took a lot of time in planning, but they have the patience to plan something that's going to happen in the next 10 years, not the next 1 year. So I really feel that there's a more long-term view. So like a long-term planning and the willingness to wait for things to happen. Another example was when I did a cover story about also climate crisis. I interviewed a lady who is from Wales, and she was the chair of the Committee on Future Generations. So they really had this long-term view that we are going to make our plans today with the benefits of the future generations in mind, because we are responsible for them hundreds of years down the line. So we have to make the policies now which are not going to put our future generations in debt. But I don't feel that view would be prevalent in Taiwan, because we have elections every 4 years, and the politicians are always thinking about what can I make, what can I produce in the next 3 months, 1 year, 2 years.
That will help me get reelected.
Yes, that will help. So everything, everything is about re-election. Nothing is really about the future generations, because the future generations they can't vote for me in 4 years. So why do I have to care about them? And I only have to care about the here and now, because here are the people who are going to vote for me in 4 years. So I really feel a lot of the policies are very short-sighted. Hence the carbon credit exchange. Something that we can create in 1 month.
Yeah.
Right.
What do we do about it? I mean, we all want to do the switch, but the switch is actually proactively worked against because of power struggles and such, money, industries. What do you think we should do about it?
Yeah, so that's the question I ask myself all the time. Like with the political situation like this, with elections coming up very often, and everything is about election, I still think what I can do as a journalist working in a media outlet is to try to provide the most accurate information for people. Maybe my hope is that out of every 100 people who have read my story, maybe 10 people will change their mind. Maybe 1 person will change their behavior. So that's how optimistic I am. So one at a time. If I could just provide the most accurate, unbiased information, we could maybe educate the public. They can become more informed citizens who are thinking not just about themselves, not just about their profits in the next few years. I do think we have to try everything. And sometimes when it becomes too difficult for the government to change things, maybe it's time for businesses, the visionary business people, the investors who have their vision to drive things. For example, like the Bill Gates of the world, the Elon Musk's, maybe these are just some examples of people who have the vision to try to change things. So Musk with the EVs, and maybe I really hope one day he invests more of his money in renewable energy or alternative energy sources. But we could see that Gates, who is also a main investor of Breakthrough Energy Ventures, has really put a lot of efforts in alternative energy sources that are decarbonized and stable. And I think these are very important directions to take. So I think if the technologies, as they become more available, there will be more chance for them to get noticed by the policymakers and the people, so that we have more options for the future. So yeah, we just have.
So you
hopes.
I feel that you're still yet positive in a sense, and you believe that the big change will come from industries or people, companies, rather than politicians.
Right. I do think they have to work together. Because the real solutions could only be developed by visionaries in the business. They would not come out of the energy, department. They will have a lot of experts, maybe in policy making, but the real change is developed by the businesses. That's what I believe.
Ending on a hopeful note. That's good.
Yes, always.
I'm bringing you to the part where we actually have questions from the future. So this is one of our children who is asking you a question.
Questions from our future.
What do you want me to do different than your generation?
First of all, I think the future generations will come up with their own priorities. But if I'm going to give my 2 cents, I think it'll be try to live in harmony with everyone and everything around you. Try not to be human-centric. And I think our generations are very human-centric. We think we are the king of the universe and we could do whatever we want to people around us. As long as we are more powerful, we could use any resource around us, and we are just depleting all the resources as we like to maximize our profits for now. So I think maybe the future generation, when there is no longer currency, when there is no longer maybe they live in the metaverse or something, so they will be able to live in harmony with the world and not take anything for granted and not take unjust advantage of anything. So it's just one idea.
I like that, living in harmony.
Yeah, living in harmony, which is actually very Confucius, ancient Chinese way of thinking. Yes.
True that. True that. I wanted to jump into another segment we actually have on this podcast, and that is the segment of uncomfortable conversations.
Ooh,
Are you
okay.
ready for that?
Yes, love those. I'm all about making people uncomfortable. But
Good.
Uncomfortable conversations.
We've been talking a little bit about this, but journalists and media are often criticized for not reporting enough on climate change and sustainability. Do you think it's true, or are readers not interested in the topics?
yeah, that's a chicken and egg problem. Like I said before, I would say before COP21 2015-16, readers in Taiwan generally were not really interested in climate-related topics. But now that I think it's on everyone's mind, I do think the new challenge now is to come up with new ways, new angles to cover climate. So I mentioned the glacier and the polar bear angle, and then we have a lot of business stories. But now we try to combine different fields of knowledge to cover climate. So for example, I'll give you an example of recently we did a story on how to tackle the heat problem in urban Taipei City. So it's a climate story, but it's also an urban planning story. We interview a lot of climate experts. There was data showing that the increase of temperature in Taipei City among 20 major cities in Asia, Taipei ranks the second, just behind Beijing. So we're just digging into why Taipei is so hot, and also there could be some solutions in urban planning, how we plan the buildings, how we can leave more space, we could create corridors for wind. So this is a climate story, but it's also about architecture, about urban planning. So it's not just about hard science, but also how you can make your living spaces a little bit more comfortable, less hot, just by creating wind. You could also save energy because of that, because then...
That's a good example.
Yeah. So this story got a lot of attention because it was really published around the time when Taipei was super hot. It was over 38 degrees. So it got a lot of people's attention, and it was also a new approach. So I would say that our challenge now is to combine different topics to really showcase the interdisciplinary nature of the climate question. So, right, that's the new challenge.
I agree with you, but to dwell in a little bit more on the uncomfortable, I mean, disinformation and skepticism is still a big part of energy and climate reporting, in a sense. And there are stories where journalists have been bought to report about something that is good. You mentioned it a little bit earlier about these scams, but and everybody tries to show off their good and green side. How do we make sure that the reporting is so correct and so not bought that it actually really creates awareness? What are your thoughts on that?
Right, so I could only speak about myself and my organization. We have really high ethic, so we have separate departments for editorial and sales, right? So that might not sound like anything, but in Taiwan, it's become the norm to mix the editorial department and the sales department. So anyone with some money, you can really buy coverage by real reporters. But in our magazine, it doesn't happen. They are completely separate. And if there's sponsor content, it says so. It says sponsor content. So you can never get like the stories that are completely bought, right? So I could only speak by, from ourselves. So what we can do at the organization is just to make sure that we get the most unbiased information to try to combat a lot of misinformation out there, because I cannot change what other people do.
No, definitely. And I mean, the challenge in my perspective is that there is to get information today is so easy. The source is not discussed. So I mean, information and articles and videos and such, they come from, you name it, the different source. And it doesn't always come from, for example, the Commonwealth, if you look at that.
Right.
And people trust what they see and what they read.
Right.
I mean, as a CMO of Basel Capital, I get approached about twice per week, someone who wants me to buy an article from them. And when I say, no, we only do organic, so we only grow ourselves, and if someone wants to interview us, that's okay. But we're not paying to be interviewed. That actually becomes uncomfortable in the situation. Like, I mean, that must be so irritating as well, as a journalist that does a really hard work and really tries to dig out the stories that these, like, from the side come and take airtime.
Yeah.
What is your perspective on that?
Well, yeah, that is really a big challenge, because we know that other people are doing that. You know, all the media outlets are reaching out to companies saying, oh yeah, we could sell you this, we could sell you that. Well, again, there is no control. But I do want to comment on the aspect that there's really information overload for everyone. Every single second there is information. There's TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Reels, stories. So much entertaining content out there. So, you know, we cannot complain if people do not read our serious stories. What we have to do is to turn our serious stories into more entertaining forms, so that people will pay attention. So I just named a recent example of the urban wind corridor story. We were able to have some really young interns make eye-catching Instagram stories to make people aware. So instead of giving them a super long article, there was a lot of graphics and moving images, and we embedded our core messages in those 30 seconds of Instagram stories. So at least we could get the message out there. So for people who are not interested in reading a long article, they could watch that 30-second story and know, oh, okay, the climate story could also be told this way. And
I love that example.
Yeah.
I think that is awesome. I think that's exactly what we need to do. Right?
Yeah, new storytelling.
Yeah, new storytelling, but from the credible sources.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I mean, to all the switchers out there, we really need to start looking into the sources. Where does this information come from?
Right.
Who paid for it? Because someone is always paying for something, right?
That's true.
To make sure that it's a genuine and correct source.
Right. Yeah. So we're really relying on the readers and audiences out there to be smarter and more discerning. Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, it's again chicken and egg, but from positive side, if they read up more on the correct sources, they will be able to participate and make better choices for themselves as well.
Yes. Yeah. So choose your diet well is what I would say.
I love that one. One important thing about making awareness, you mentioned a little bit in an earlier conversation we had about the right people talking, influencers. You've had a very interesting, or I would say you've had a prestigious interview with a person who has a lot of effect in the industry. You interviewed Bill Gates.
So a few years ago, yeah.
Yeah. How was that, and what did you bring out of that meeting?
So that was really a rare opportunity. It was because a book by Bill Gates, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster.
Which is, by the way, a fantastic book.
Yes, yeah. So we published the traditional Chinese version of that book. That's why we are able to had an interview. It was a group interview with, I think, 10 other journalists from Asia Pacific region. So there are people from Australia, India, Japan, and Korea. And there were 2 reporters from Taiwan, me and another young lady. And my takeaway from that was, I think for someone like Bill Gates, when you're looking really with a bird-eye view of the climate issue and with a lot of resources at hand, you're really thinking about the big direction and the big issues and how can I empower the largest number of people? How can I help the most people, not just Taiwanese people, because he's looking at the issues globally. He's looking at Africa and Latin America, China, and where the biggest populations lie, because that means the most impact for the world, because he's trying to make impact for the world, not just Taiwan. So really, the perspectives are so different. What my biggest takeaway was that I like how he was agnostic about technology. Like some people would say that, oh, nuclear energy is bad or fossil energy is bad, but he doesn't look at it that way. He just looks at accumulated impacts for the environment and accumulated benefits for the most people. Whatever that could produce the best result for the largest number of people is good. So I really like that he is not ideal. It's not driven by ideology, but driven by an urge to improve the lives and societies for most people. And that's what I think is lacking in a lot of the thinking of business people or policymakers in Taiwan, because we tend to just look at a very small piece of land and maybe we look at for the next few years instead of next few generations.
Isn't that a human problem in general? Sometimes also you can look at yourself and you look at a small part. But for example, we're talking about flight shame. You shouldn't fly. But many people are not aware that every time you send that extra email, that takes up amounts of energy.
Right.
Or when you don't close down your laptop, that also consumes energy. Or littering, or all those kind of things. And I think that the cumulative things we do as an individual, as a company, as a government, actually has bigger impact than fixing one problem.
Right, yeah. So we tend to point out other people's problems, but not our own problems. And I think that's a human error, I would say, that's really common in all of us. But I think there should be a balance. We should look at the small behaviors. Of course, they are really important, but also the larger picture. And I think the fact that humans are so nervous and that the fact that we're sitting here talking about the importance of the switch, it proves that we are not beyond redemption. We are still, we're not just wallowing and pretending nothing is wrong. We are aware that something is wrong and that we have to change, and all of us need to be on board. So
I think you just did an excellent summary of today's conversation. Would you like to add something else?
Oh, I would just be curious, maybe one more question for you, because Christina, you have visited Taiwan several times over the past few years. And what's your observation of the change in attitude or awareness regarding climate policy or environment?
I'm pretty impressed. If I just take the different markets that we are in, actually, Taiwan has made the biggest changes in the shortest amount of time. Okay. If you look at it. So when we started 5 years ago, we came to Taiwan about four years ago and started this. No one was talking about geothermal at the time. Then there were a couple of occasions, your article being one of them, that actually launched a conversation. And there has been great leaps. And I think that it's a great combination of government, company, and also like media in that sense to actually put it on the topic. With that said, I'm impressed, but I do think that you're right. I mean, we need to start talking with all the other parts of the ecosystem as well, because it's still a niche thing. We can run fast until a certain point, but in order for geothermal in this case to progress, then we need a collaboration with all the other renewables we need to discuss on a bigger agenda. So I think that I see speed, at least in this area, but I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see the conversation moving forward now and see how, as you mentioned earlier, accumulatively, how can actually Taiwan transition, because there are still a lot of things to do.
Right. Yeah.
I must also add, I mean, to be honest and respectful to this country, you have a situation that I don't think that many other countries can put themselves in. To you have to live really now. You cannot think too much of the future. You don't want to worry too much about the circumstances that is in Taiwan. But I still believe, and I get energy of being here, because all due to these challenges, Taiwan people continue to strive and want. And that, I think, is something that the world needs to learn. You started this conversation today with talking about accepting where you are and continue to do what you can. And I think that this country itself shows that that is possible, and that we all need to learn from it.
Yeah. Thank you, Christina. That's a more positive note, I think, for today.
We ended on good positive notes. If you would say the top 3 things that you bring with you from today's episode, what would that be?
Well, I think it's really optimism. I could sense there's a lot of optimism in during our conversation, the hope for things to be better. And that's one takeaway. And that's also something that's also part of our philosophy of our magazine. And the second is I really like how you are critical and on a lot of issues. We're not just taking things by the appearance. We're just really digging into what's really underneath. And that's, I think, lacking in a lot of conversations that we have today. So people are just jumping to conclusions too quickly. And third is really an urge to be self-reflective. Not a lot of people can do that or want to do that because it's uncomfortable for a lot of people. It's easier to be like super confident and think I'm always right, this is the best solution. But I think it's really very important to have a healthy dose of self-doubt and skepticism of what you do, like questioning all the time if this is really the best route to take. And could we make it better? Can we listen to more opinions, and can we make more people happy? So being self-reflective is another big takeaway. So it's a very philosophical conversation. I really enjoyed it.
So did I, very much so. And again, thank you for hard efforts. The truth needs to be out there, and you're doing a great and important job to do that. For you, the viewers and listeners of The Switch, I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I want you to check out and share this episode to at least 4 people that you think can be a part of changing the world together with us. So thank you very much for today.
Thank you, Christina.
And
it's a pleasure.
See you again. We'll be back and do a report on how we actually moved forward with the transition in Taiwan.
Okay.
Is that a deal?
Sure. Looking forward to that.
Good. Thank
Enjoy.
you. Take care. And if you can, take care of also someone else. See you out there.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.